Jake Morrison sat in the corner of the massive council chamber, watching the alien delegates argue about mining rights. His blue suit looked plain next to the colorful robes and strange armor worn by the other species. The human section was small, just 3 chairs in the back corner. It had been that way for 50 years, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Council. The Zephyrian delegate was speaking now. His scales were a deep purple color, and they changed to bright red when he got angry. He was very angry today. The Zephyrians wanted to mine asteroids in the Kepler system. The problem was that 3 smaller species lived on planets nearby. The mining would poison their water and kill their crops. The Kepler system belongs to whoever can use it best, the Zephyrian said, his voice like grinding metal. These weak species contribute nothing to the galaxy. We offer progress and prosperity. Several other delegates nodded. The strong species always agreed with each other when it came to taking things from the weak ones. Jake had watched this same scene play out hundreds of times over the years. The Deltan representative stood up. She was small and fragile-looking, with pale skin and large eyes. Her people were farmers and healers. They had never hurt anyone in their entire history. "Please," she said in a soft voice, "the mining ships will destroy our crops. Our children will have nothing to eat. Is there not room in the galaxy for all of us?" Some of the delegates laughed. The Sarn military commander made a sound like a growling dog. To him, the Deltans were just prey animals who happened to speak. Jake listened to it all with a calm expression. His gray eyes showed nothing. He had learned long ago to keep his feelings hidden in this place. Earth was still the newest member of the council. They were expected to be quiet and grateful. "Earth abstains from this vote," Jake said when his turn came. His voice was polite and respectful. "We believe each species should decide such matters for themselves." The council speaker nodded approvingly. Veltar was older than most civilizations. His species had been keeping peace in the galaxy for thousands of years. He liked that humans were so reasonable and peaceful. "Very wise, Ambassador Morrison," Veltar said. "Earth continues to show great maturity in council affairs." The vote was not even close. The Zephyrians got their mining rights. The small species would just have to deal with the poisoned water and dead crops. It was the way things worked in the galaxy. The strong took what they wanted. The weak suffered in silence. Jake gathered his papers and walked toward the exit. He nodded politely to other delegates as he passed. Some ignored him completely. Others gave him small smiles. Humans were harmless and boring, but at least they caused no trouble. Captain Lisa Brooks was waiting in the hallway outside the chamber. She wore a simple gray uniform with no weapons or military symbols. Officially, she was Jake's security advisor. Her real job was much more interesting. "How did the vote go?" Lisa asked as they walked toward the transport bay. "As expected," Jake replied. "The Zephyrians got everything they wanted." "And the Deltans will need our help sooner than planned?" They walked in silence through the long corridors of the council station. The walls were covered with symbols from 100 different species. Most of them represented civilizations that no longer existed. They had been too weak to survive when the strong decided to expand their territory. In the transport bay, Jake's shuttle waited next to much larger ships belonging to the major powers. The human vessel looked small and fragile. Its hull was plain, white with simple blue markings. No weapons were visible on the outside. Lisa started the engines while Jake sent a coded message on his personal communicator. To anyone watching, it would look like he was updating Earth about the council meeting. The real message was much shorter. Package delivery needed. Standard humanitarian supplies. Priority level 3. Within an hour, 3 human cargo ships would change their flight plans. Their official cargo was food and medicine for camps in the outer systems. The sealed containers in their holds contained something very different. Advanced shield generators, mining equipment, and fabrication units that could build whatever the Deltans needed to protect themselves. The shuttle left the Council Station and jumped to hyperspace. Through the window, Jake could see the massive Zephyrian battle fleet conducting exercises near the station. 12 heavy cruisers and twice as many smaller ships. It was meant to remind everyone of Zephyrian power. Jake was not impressed. He had seen the specifications for those ships. Human intelligence knew exactly how fast they could fly, how hard they could hit, and most importantly, how to kill them if necessary. On Earth, Admiral Rick Carter was reading those same intelligence reports in his office deep underground. The Rocky Mountain facility was officially a weather research station. The dozens of levels below ground told a different story. Rick was a big man with gray hair and scars from wars the Council had never heard about. Before first contact, he had fought in conflicts across 3 continents. Now he fought battles that most humans never knew were happening. The latest reports showed Zephyrian fleet movements in 7 different sectors. They were testing defenses, looking for weakness. 3 minor species had already been forced to sign new trade agreements that were barely disguised surrender documents. Rick approved deployment orders for the 7th Expeditionary Fleet. On paper, they were conducting training exercises in empty space. In reality, they would be positioned to respond if the Zephyrians tried to expand their operations. The human ships would stay hidden and quiet unless needed. Earth had learned the value of patience from watching the galaxy tear itself apart for 50 years. Let the strong fight each other. Humans would be ready when the time came. Dr. Helen Price was having a very different kind of meeting in Geneva. The tall blonde woman sat across from delegates from 6 different species. They had come to Earth to learn about human culture and government. At least, that was what their official reports would say. Your people have suffered greatly under Zephyrian economic pressure, Helen said to the Arcturian delegate. Perhaps we can help you become more self-sufficient. The Arcturian nodded eagerly. His people were skilled engineers, but they lacked the resources to build advanced technology. The Zephyrians made sure of that by controlling access to rare materials. We have established several educational programs, Helen continued. Your young people could learn valuable skills that would benefit your entire civilization. What she did not say was that those skills included advanced manufacturing techniques, resource extraction methods, and defensive technologies. The students would return home knowing how to build things that could protect their people from economic bullying. Conversations were happening in conference rooms around the world. Earth hosted cultural exchanges with dozens of species. The smaller and weaker the species, the more interested Earth seemed to be in their culture and history. The galaxy saw it as typical human behavior. They were collectors of knowledge, always curious about other ways of life. It was harmless and even admirable in a simple, primitive way. What the galaxy missed were the cargo ships that left Earth every day. They carried teachers and advisors to distant worlds. They brought back students and refugees. And hidden in sealed compartments, they transported things that did not appear on any official manifest. Jake's shuttle arrived at Earth 12 hours after leaving the Council Station. He took a private transport to his real office in Colorado. The public knew him as a diplomat and peacemaker. His actual job was much more complex. The Situation Room was full of activity when he arrived. Analysts were tracking ship movements across the galaxy. Communications specialists were maintaining contact with human assets on 100 different worlds. Military planners were updating contingency plans for conflicts that might happen next week or next century. Status report, Jake said as he took his seat at the central table. The Deltan supply run is approved and underway, reported Colonel Sam Davis, Jake's deputy for covert operations. They should receive their humanitarian aid within 48 hours. Zephyrian fleet movements? Increased activity in 4 sectors. They're definitely planning something big. Our assets in the region? Ready to respond. The locals think they're conducting trade missions and cultural exchanges. Jake nodded and turned to the intelligence section. Major Kate Wilson was his. Best analyst, a small woman with sharp eyes who could find patterns that others missed. What's the bigger picture, Kate? The Zephyrians are getting bolder, she replied, calling up a galactic map on the main screen. They've identified 12 systems they want to control. Each one has strategic value and weak defenses. Timeline? 6 months to 2 years, depending on how much resistance they encounter. Jake studied the map. Red markers showed Zephyrian targets. Blue markers showed human-allied systems. Green markers showed neutral systems that could go either way. There was a lot of overlap. Recommendations? Accelerate the cultural exchange programs. Get more advisors in place. Increase humanitarian aid shipments to build goodwill and supply. Our people. Do it. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. They discussed contingency plans, resource allocation, and intelligence gathering operations. To an outside observer, it would look like Earth was preparing for war. In reality, they were preparing for peace. 3 months after the Kepler system vote, strange reports began reaching the Council intelligence offices. The first one came from a Zephyrian trade inspector who had been sent to check on Arcturian manufacturing facilities. The factories are completely different, Inspector Kraltek reported to his superiors. 3 months ago, the Arcturians could barely produce basic tools. Now they have equipment that rivals our own industrial capacity. The report landed on the desk of Council. Security Chief Zalthara. The 6-armed insectoid had been keeping the galaxy safe for over 2 centuries. His compound eyes could see patterns that others missed. His multiple arms could work on several problems at once. Right now, all 6 arms were busy sorting through similar reports from across the galaxy. The Deltans had somehow acquired new water purification systems that could clean the poison from Zephyrian mining operations. The systems were more advanced than anything the Deltans had ever built before. When asked about it, they claimed the technology came from their own research programs. The vegan colonies had upgraded their communication networks overnight. Their new systems could reach across 3-star systems without any delay. Previously, it took weeks for messages to travel between their worlds. The Centauri Federation had built new, defensive platforms around their home system. The platforms used energy shielding technology that even the major powers found impressive. The Centaurians said they had developed it themselves through decades of careful research. Each case had perfect documentation. Every technology transfer had proper licenses. Every upgrade had been paid for through legitimate trade agreements. The paperwork was so clean, it made Zalthara suspicious. He called a meeting with his top investigators. The conference room was small and windowless, hidden deep inside the Council security complex. 5 species were represented around the table, each one expert at finding secrets that others wanted to hide. Something is wrong, Zalthara clicked in his native language. The universal translator made his words sound calm and professional. 17 minor species have made major technological advances in the past 4 months. The probability of this happening naturally is less than 1%. Lieutenant Commander Zexara of the Sarn Military Intelligence nodded her scaled head. My people have noticed similar patterns. Worlds that should be defenseless now have weapons that make our scouts nervous. What kind of weapons? Asked Agent Mordak from the Regelian spy network. Energy dampeners that can shut down plasma cannons. Stealth mines that appear from nowhere. Point defense systems that can track and destroy missiles traveling at 90% of light speed. Zalthara S. Anteni twitched with concern. Those were not primitive weapons built by farmers and merchants. They were military-grade systems designed by experts who understood modern warfare. Have we identified any common factors among these species? Agent Jill Tar from the Andromedan Surveillance Corps activated a holographic display. All 17 species have participated in human cultural exchange programs within the past 2 years. All have received humanitarian aid from Earth within the past 6 months. The room fell silent. Everyone knew humans were peaceful and helpful. They had been model citizens since joining the Council 50 years ago. The idea that Earth might be involved in illegal weapons smuggling seemed impossible. Humans are not warriors, Lieutenant Commander Zexara said. They avoid conflict whenever possible. Their military technology is decades behind the major powers. Their official military technology, Zalthara corrected. We know very little about their actual capabilities. He ordered covert surveillance operations on human activities throughout the galaxy. His agents would watch human ships, monitor human communications, and investigate human facilities on a dozen different worlds. If Earth was involved in these mysterious upgrades, the Council would find proof. On Earth, Jake Morrison was having breakfast in his Geneva apartment when the first surveillance alert reached his secure communicator. The message was coded as a weather report, but Jake understood its real meaning immediately. Storms expected in multiple regions. Recommend indoor activities for the next several weeks. Jake finished his coffee and sent his own coded reply. Thank you for the weather update. We'll adjust travel plans accordingly. Within hours, human operations across the galaxy shifted into higher security protocols. Cargo ships changed their routes to avoid known surveillance zones. Communication frequencies were altered to prevent eavesdropping. Personnel on sensitive missions received new cover identities and false documentation. Captain Lisa Brooks was aboard the cargo ship Peaceful Trader when the security alert reached her. The ship was officially carrying medical supplies to a refugee camp in the Tau Ceti system. The sealed containers in the cargo hold contained something much more valuable. Change course for the alternate destination, Lisa told the ship's captain. We have a medical emergency that requires immediate attention. The Peaceful Trader altered its flight path and jumped to hyperspace. Instead of the refugee camp, it would dock at a small research station operated by human scientists. The medical supplies would be transferred to another ship and reach their real destination through a much longer and more secretive route. Similar changes were happening throughout human space. The network that had taken 50 years to build was adapting to new threats in a matter of hours. Supply lines shifted like water flowing around obstacles. Communication networks rerouted through backup channels. Personnel vanished from their official assignments and reappeared in completely different locations. Dr. Helen Price received her own coded message while teaching a class on human philosophy to students from 6 different species. The message was hidden in what appeared to be a routine administrative update about class schedules. Field trip to historical sites postponed due to weather conditions. Indoor study programs will continue as planned. Helen smiled at her students and continued her lecture about human concepts of justice and cooperation. What she did not mention was that half of these students would graduate with knowledge that did not appear in any official curriculum. The Arcturian student named Velkron was particularly interested in human manufacturing techniques. His people were skilled engineers, but they lacked the resources to build advanced technology. Helen had been teaching him about distributed production methods that could turn simple materials into complex systems. Your people once fought a war using only basic industrial equipment, Velkron said during a private study session. How did you manage to produce military hardware so quickly? Necessity and creativity, Helen replied. When survival is at stake, humans can be very innovative. We learned to make the most of whatever resources we had available. She showed him historical examples from Earth's past. Factories that had produced cars suddenly making aircraft engines. Shipyards that built cargo vessels switching to warships. Scientists who studied peaceful applications, finding military uses for their research. What she did not tell him was that similar transformations were already happening on his home world. Human advisors were teaching Arcturian engineers how to convert their existing factories for new purposes. Mining equipment could be modified to produce shield generators. Communication satellites could be upgraded to serve as early warning systems. The lessons were always framed as historical education or theoretical discussion. Students learned about human ingenuity and adaptability through case studies and academic exercises. They returned home with new perspectives on resource management and industrial efficiency. Council surveillance teams watching these cultural exchanges saw exactly what they expected to see. Human teachers sharing their history and philosophy with eager students from other species. The humans seemed genuinely interested in promoting education and cultural understanding. What the surveillance teams missed were the subtle signals and coded conversations that happened outside the formal classroom settings. Students who stayed after class to ask additional questions. Teachers who provided extra reading materials for particularly interested pupils. Study groups that met in private to discuss advanced topics. Agent Corthil of the Zephyrian Intelligence Service had been watching the Human Cultural Center on Rigel Prime for 2 weeks. His reports described routine educational activities and peaceful interactions between species. Nothing suspicious or threatening. He did notice that several students seemed unusually dedicated to their studies. They spent long hours in the library, reading human texts about engineering and resource management. But dedication to learning was hardly a crime. What Agent Corthal did not realize was that the library contained more than just books and data files. Hidden servers provided access to technical databases that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Students with the right access codes could download manufacturing specifications, defensive system blueprints, and tactical manuals that would be priceless. To their home governments, the information was carefully disguised as historical research or theoretical studies. A paper on ancient human mining techniques contained detailed specifications for asteroid processing equipment. A dissertation on human transportation systems included blueprints for high-speed cargo ships that could outrun most military vessels. The breaking point came when the hegemony of Sarn launched their attack on the Deltan colonies. Admiral Krontax commanded the invasion fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Fist. He had conquered 17 different worlds during his long military career. The peaceful Deltans should have been the easiest victory of all. Krontax studied the intelligence reports as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the first Deltan world. The planet below was green and beautiful, covered with farms and small cities. The Deltans had no military ships, no orbital defenses, and no weapons of any kind. Their entire civilization was built around healing and growing things. "This will be over before lunch," Krontax told his officers. "Deploy landing forces to secure the major population centers. Use minimum force. We want the Deltans alive to work in our factories." The first wave of Sarn troop transports headed toward the planet's surface. Krontax expected to receive surrender messages within the hour. Instead, he watched in shock as his ships began exploding. "Report!" he roared at his tactical officer. "Energy dampeners, sir. Our plasma cannons are not responding. The transport ships are losing power and falling toward the planet. That's impossible. The Deltans don't have military technology." More explosions lit up the space around the planet. Sarn fighters were being destroyed by weapons that seemed to appear from nowhere. Stealth mines detonated next to troop ships, tearing them apart with precise strikes that targeted their weakest points. "Sir, the Deltans are broadcasting a message," reported the communications officer. "Put it on screen." A middle-aged Deltan woman appeared on the main display. She wore simple farmer's clothing and stood in what looked like a grain field. Behind her, Chrometax could see other Deltans working calmly in their gardens, apparently unconcerned about the battle raging in orbit above them. "This is Elder Miranel of the Deltan Council," the woman said in a gentle voice. "We ask you to leave our worlds in peace. We have no wish to harm you, but we will defend our children if necessary." Chrometax laughed. "You dare threaten the Sarn hegemony? We have conquered civilizations that could crush your entire species with a single ship." "We know," Miranel replied sadly. "That is why we prepared." The transmission ended. Chrometax turned to his tactical officer. "Status of the invasion force? 70% casualties, sir. The survivors are requesting immediate evacuation. The Deltans are fighting with coordinated tactics and advanced weapons. They know our ship specifications, our attack patterns, even our emergency protocols." Chrometax felt ice in his stomach. No primitive farming world should know classified Sarn military information. There was only one explanation. "They have help," he said quietly. "Professional military advisors. Find out who." The battle continued for 6 hours. Every time the Sarn forces tried a new approach, the Deltans were ready with perfect countermeasures. When Sarn fighters attacked from above, ground-based weapons appeared from hidden positions to shoot them down. When troop ships tried to land in remote areas, they found defensive minefields that had not been there the day before. Most disturbing of all, the Deltan defenders fought with the precision of trained soldiers. These were not farmers with pitchforks. They moved like veterans who had studied Sarn tactics for years. The final blow came when the Iron Fist itself came under attack. A series of small explosions throughout the ship caused what appeared to be a catastrophic reactor failure. Chrometax barely had time to evacuate his crew before the massive dreadnought tore itself apart, as his escape pod drifted away from the wreckage. Chrometax realized something that made his warrior heart cold with fear. The explosion pattern was identical to a human military tactic called the Prometheus Protocol. It was a classified technique that existed only in theoretical documents hidden in the deepest Earth military archives. The Deltans had not just defeated the Sarn invasion. They had done it using human knowledge and human weapons. News of the Sarn defeat spread through the galaxy within days. Emergency council sessions were called to discuss the implications. How had a peaceful farming world managed to destroy one of the most powerful military forces in known space? Jake Morrison attended each emergency session with appropriate expressions of concern and sympathy. He offered humanitarian aid to both sides and suggested that diplomatic solutions were always preferable to military action. Earth stands ready to provide medical assistance and refugee support to any species affected by this tragic conflict, Jake said during one heated debate. Violence serves no one's interests. Behind his diplomatic words, Jake was receiving constant updates from human intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. The victory at Delta Prime had been even more successful than expected. Not only had the Deltans defended themselves, but they had captured significant amounts of Sarn military equipment and intelligence data. More importantly, 17 other species had watched the battle and drawn their own conclusions. If peaceful farmers could defeat a Sarn invasion fleet, perhaps they did not need to submit to threats from the major powers. Within weeks, similar defensive preparations began appearing on worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had been helpless against economic pressure suddenly developed the ability to protect their trade routes. Colonies that had been easy targets for raiders found themselves equipped with early warning systems and rapid response capabilities. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Council Security Chief Zal Thara compiled evidence from dozens of intelligence sources, and presented his findings to an emergency security meeting. "The evidence is overwhelming," Salthara reported to the assembled security chiefs from 5 major powers. "Human fingerprints are all over these defensive upgrades." He activated a holographic display showing weapons fragments recovered from the Delta Prime battle. These energy dampener components use manufacturing techniques that only exist in human industrial facilities. The metal alloys match samples from Earth's outer colonies. Agent Korthul from the Zephyrian Intelligence Service added his own evidence. "Our surveillance teams have identified human advisors on 14 different worlds. They are not diplomats or teachers. They are military specialists with combat experience." "How long has this been going on?" asked Lieutenant Commander Zex Ara. "Based on the sophistication of the defensive networks, at least 15 years, Zalthara replied, "possibly longer. The humans have been building this capability while maintaining perfect diplomatic cover." The security meeting lasted for hours. Evidence was presented and analyzed. Patterns were identified and confirmed. By the end, even the most skeptical participants had to admit the truth. Earth had been conducting covert military operations throughout Council space for decades. They had been training weaker species, providing advanced weapons, and building defensive alliances, all while maintaining the appearance of peaceful, cooperative newcomers to galactic civilization. "What do we do about it?" asked Agent Mordek from the Rigelian Spy Network. "We confront them," Zalthara replied. "Present the evidence and demand an explanation. And if they deny everything, then we present stronger evidence. And if necessary, we take action to protect galactic stability." The confrontation was scheduled for the next regular council session. Jake Morrison would be given the opportunity to explain human activities and respond to the charges against Earth. If his answers were not satisfactory, the council would consider more serious measures. Jake received advance warning of the planned confrontation through human intelligence. Sources embedded throughout the council bureaucracy. He was not surprised. The Deltan victory had been too dramatic to ignore. The council was bound to connect the evidence eventually. He spent the next week in meetings with human military and intelligence leaders, preparing for what might be most important diplomatic encounter in human history. The decision was unanimous. It was time to stop pretending Dr. Helen Price was teaching her final class to the current group of exchange students when Jake's message reached her. The coded communication was disguised as a routine administrative notice about semester schedules. Final examinations will be held next week. All students should prepare to demonstrate their complete understanding of the subject material. Helen smiled at her students and continued the lesson about human approaches to conflict resolution. What the message really meant was that her students needed to return home immediately with everything they had learned. The secret phase of human cultural exchange was ending. Similar messages went out to human personnel across the galaxy. Advisors completed their current assignments and prepared for extraction. Supply ships made final deliveries and altered course for human space. Military units conducting training exercises moved to positions where they could respond quickly if diplomacy failed. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth had been playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. For 50 years, humans had been building alliances, sharing technology, and preparing for the day when their true capabilities would be revealed. Admiral Rick Carter stood in his command center, watching displays that showed human assets throughout known space. 43 species had received some form of human assistance. 17 had formal defensive agreements. 7 had human military advisors permanently stationed on their worlds. Council Speaker Veltar's ancient voice filled the chamber as he began the most serious session in centuries. "Ambassador Morrison, We have evidence that Earth has been conducting secret military operations throughout Council space. These activities violate the spirit of galactic law and threaten the stability that has maintained peace for generations. Jake Morrison remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. His gray eyes showed no fear or surprise. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species watched with intense interest. This was the moment that would define humanity's future in the galaxy. The charges are serious, Veltar continued. We have documented proof of human involvement in weapons transfers to 17 different species. We have identified human military advisors operating under false diplomatic cover. We have recovered human-manufactured equipment from battle sites where it should not exist. Zolthara activated the chamber's main display. Images appeared showing weapon fragments, manufacturing specifications, and surveillance photos of humans in locations far from their official assignments. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Most damning of all, Zolthara clicked in his mechanical voice. We have confirmed that the recent Deltan victory over Sarn forces was achieved using classified human military tactics. The Prometheus Protocol is known only to Earth's highest military commanders, yet we observed its precise execution during the destruction of the Iron Fist. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Prometheus Protocol was legendary among military strategists. It was considered one of the most sophisticated ship-killing techniques ever developed. The fact that Deltan farmers had used it against a Sarn dreadnought was impossible to explain through conventional means. Jake listened to the accusations with the patience of a man who had been preparing for this moment for 50 years. When the presentation finally ended, he looked directly at Veltar and smiled. "You're absolutely right," Jake said quietly. The simple admission hit the chamber like a physical blow. Delegates who had expected denials and diplomatic explanations found themselves facing something much more dangerous. A human who was no longer pretending to be harmless. Earth has been conducting military operations throughout the galaxy, Jake continued. We have been training allied species in advanced combat techniques. We have been providing weapons and defensive systems to worlds that needed protection. We have been building a network of mutual defense agreements that spans dozens of star systems. The Zephyrian delegate rose from his seat, his purple scales darkening with rage. This is an admission of guilt. Earth has violated every principle of galactic law. Actually, we haven't, Jake replied calmly. Every action we've taken has been technically legal under Council regulations. We've provided humanitarian aid, educational programs, and cultural exchanges. The fact that these activities had additional purposes doesn't make them illegal. Zolthara's compound eyes focused on Jake with laser intensity. You cannot claim that weapons smuggling and military training are humanitarian activities. Jake activated his own holographic display. Documents appeared showing decades of careful legal preparation, treaties, agreements, and regulatory interpretations that had been filed with Council bureaucrats over the years. Article 12 of the Galactic Aid Provision allows member species to provide assistance to developing worlds. Jake read from the display. Article 27 permits educational exchanges between species. Article 31 authorizes the sharing of defensive technologies for protection against piracy and raids. The legal documents were all authentic and properly filed. Earth's lawyers had spent decades creating a framework that would allow human activities to remain technically within Council law. Every weapons transfer had been documented as defensive aid. Every military advisor had official educational credentials. Every training program had been registered as cultural exchange. You used the law as a weapon, accused the Andromedan representative. We used the law as it was written, Jake corrected. The Council created regulations that allowed stronger species to dominate weaker ones. We simply found ways to help the weak defend themselves within that same legal framework. Lieutenant Commander Zexara of the Sarn Intelligence Service stood up, her scales still bearing scars from recent battles. Legal technicalities do not change the fact that you have upset the balance of power that has maintained galactic stability. For centuries, Jake's expression hardened. The balance of power that allowed your people to invade peaceful farming worlds? The stability that permitted economic slavery and territorial conquest? We've seen your version of galactic order, Commander. Earth decided to offer an alternative. The chamber erupted in angry voices from a dozen different species. The major powers demanded sanctions against Earth. The Zephyrians called for immediate military action. The Sarn wanted human assets seized and human personnel arrested, but Jake noticed something else. The smaller species remained quiet. The delegates from worlds that had received human aid sat in their seats without joining the outcry. They understood that humanity's actions had protected them from the same fate that had befallen countless other weak civilizations. That council. Speaker Valtar raised his ancient hand for silence. Ambassador Morrison, regardless of legal technicalities, your actions have destabilized established relationships between species. The strong have always protected the weak in exchange for loyalty and resources. This system has prevented large-scale warfare for over 1,000 years. The strong have exploited the weak, Jake replied. Your system has prevented warfare by ensuring that only one side had weapons. Earth decided that real peace required a more equal distribution of defensive capabilities. He gestured to the display, which now showed a map of the galaxy with human activities marked in blue. The network was vast and comprehensive, touching nearly every inhabited system. For 50 years, Earth has been teaching weaker species that they don't have to accept domination as the price of survival. We've shown them that cooperation can be stronger than conquest. We've proven that defensive alliances can protect them better than submission to stronger powers. Admiral Rick Carter's image appeared via hologram beside Jake. The Earth Defense Force uniform was a stark contrast to the diplomatic clothing that Council delegates were used to seeing from humans. At this moment, Rick announced, Earth maintains defensive agreements with 43 species across 17 star systems. We operate 24 training facilities, 15 supply depots, and 8 rapid response bases throughout Council space. Our personnel include 12,000 military advisors, 30,000 technical specialists, and over 100,000 support staff. The numbers stunned the chamber into silence. Earth's presence in the galaxy was far larger than anyone had imagined. What they had dismissed as a small, weak species had actually built one of the most extensive networks in known space. This is impossible, whispered the Regellian security chief. Our intelligence services should have detected operations of this scale. Your intelligence services saw exactly what we wanted them to see, Jake replied. Humanitarian aid missions, cultural exchanges, and educational programs. You assumed that humans were simple and harmless because that's what we wanted you to believe. He activated another section of the display, showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been dismissed as cargo vessels and research platforms were revealed to be sophisticated military units capable of rapid deployment and sustained operations. The 7th Expeditionary Fleet has been conducting training exercises near the Kepler system for 6 months, Jake explained. Their official mission is to study stellar phenomena and test new engine configurations. Their actual mission is to respond within 4 hours if Zephyrian forces threaten allied worlds in that sector. Similar revelations followed. The 12th Support Group's humanitarian missions included the ability to establish defensive positions on 12 different worlds within 48 hours. The 3rd Research Division's exploration activities had identified strategic resources and potential base locations throughout unexplored space. Every human ship in your space serves dual purposes, Rick added. Every cultural center can become a command post. Every aid station can transform into a supply depot. Every exchange student has received basic military training along with their cultural education. The Sarn delegate stood up, his armor clanking with barely controlled rage. This is a declaration of war against every established power in the galaxy. No, Jake replied, his voice cold as space. This is a declaration that Earth will no longer pretend that might makes right. For 50 years, we've watched you divide the galaxy between predators and prey. We've seen strong species enslave weak ones and call it natural order. We've observed civilizations destroyed simply because they couldn't defend themselves. The chamber fell silent as Jake's words echoed off the ancient walls. Delegates who had built their entire cultures around the concept of strength ruling weakness found themselves facing a species that rejected their fundamental assumptions about how the galaxy should work. Earth has been acting nice because we chose to act nice, Jake continued. We wanted to give the galaxy a chance to evolve beyond its predatory instincts. The chaos in the council chamber continued for several minutes before Council Speaker Veltar finally restored order. His ancient voice carried the weight of centuries as he addressed the stunning revelations that had just been presented. Ambassador Morrison, Veltar said slowly, you have admitted to conducting the largest covert operation in galactic history. You have fundamentally altered the balance of power without the knowledge or consent of this council. What gives Earth the right to make such decisions for the entire galaxy? Jake Morrison stood calmly in the center of the storm he had created. Around him, delegates whispered urgently to their advisors, while military commanders studied the holographic displays showing human positions throughout known space. We gave ourselves that right, Jake replied simply. 50 years ago, Earth was invited to join a galactic community that we thought was based on cooperation and mutual respect. Instead, we found a system designed to keep the strong in power and the weak in chains. He gestured toward the smaller species delegation area, where representatives from dozens of previously helpless worlds sat quietly. When the Zephyrians demanded mining rights that would poison Deltan water supplies, this council voted to let it happen. When the Sarn wanted to enslave the Centauri colonies, you called it economic development. When raiders attacked merchant ships in the Outer Rim, you said it was not worth the resources to stop them. The major power delegates shifted uncomfortably. Jake's words were accurate, but they represented the natural order of galactic civilization. Strong species had always dominated weak ones. It was the way things worked. Earth decided that natural order needed to change, Jake continued. We began teaching weaker species that they had alternatives to submission. We showed them that defensive cooperation could protect them better than hoping for mercy from their stronger neighbors. The Zephyrian delegate stood up, his scales now bright red with anger. You have destabilized a system that maintained peace for over 1,000 years. Your interference has led to conflicts and chaos throughout the galaxy. Our interference has led to freedom, Jake corrected. The Deltans no longer fear Zephyrian mining fleets. The Arcturians can negotiate fair trade agreements instead of accepting whatever terms you offer. The vegan colonies have communication systems that let them call for help when raiders approach their worlds. Admiral Rick Carter's hologram stepped forward. Let me be clear about Earth's current capabilities. Our intelligence networks monitor activities in every major star system. Our supply lines can support defensive operations on 43 different worlds simultaneously. Our rapid response forces can reach any allied world within 6 hours of a distress call. The military implications were staggering. Earth had built the infrastructure for galactic-scale defensive operations while maintaining perfect secrecy. Their network was more comprehensive than anything the major powers had imagined possible. Furthermore, Rick continued. Our allied species now possess defensive capabilities that make conquest extremely expensive for potential aggressors. The cost of invading a world protected by human-trained defenders and human-supplied weapons has become higher than any possible benefit. Lieutenant Commander Zexiara of the Saran Intelligence Service studied the tactical displays with professional interest. You have created a defensive alliance that spans most of the inhabited galaxy. Even if we combined our forces, breaking through, those defenses would require decades of warfare and millions of casualties. Exactly, Jake said. War is no longer profitable. Conquest is no longer cost-effective. The major powers can continue to control their existing territories, but expansion through force has become impossible. The implications slowly sank in throughout the chamber. The galaxy's strong species had built their entire civilizations on the assumption that they could take whatever they wanted from weaker neighbors. Earth had made that assumption obsolete. Council Security Chief Zalfara clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You have essentially ended the possibility of large-scale conquest. But what about trade, economic relationships? The galaxy cannot function without resource exchange between species. Trade will continue, Jake replied. But it will be genuine trade between equal partners, not economic slavery disguised as commerce. Species will negotiate fair deals because they know they have alternatives. They can defend themselves if threatened, and they have allies who will support them if needed. Dr. Helen Price's image appeared via hologram beside Jake. Her appearance surprised many delegates who remembered her as a quiet academic interested in cultural exchange programs. For the past 15 years, our educational initiatives have created a new generation of leaders throughout the galaxy, Helen explained. Young beings who grew up learning that cooperation could achieve more than conquest. They understand that mutual prosperity creates more wealth than exploitation. She activated a display showing graduation statistics from human cultural programs. Thousands of students from dozens of species had completed advanced courses in resource management, defensive strategy, and cooperative governance. These individuals are now returning to their home worlds with new ideas about how galactic civilization should function. They represent the future of interspecies relations. The Andromedan representative spoke for the first time during the session. You have been conducting social engineering on a galactic scale. You have deliberately altered the fundamental nature of our civilization. We have offered alternatives, Jake corrected. Every species that participated in our programs did so voluntarily. Every defensive alliance was requested by worlds that needed protection. Every technology transfer was made to beings who asked for our help. The truth was undeniable. Earth had never forced their assistance on anyone. They had simply made it available to species that wanted to change their circumstances. Agent Mordak from the Regelian spy network asked the question that many delegates were thinking. What happens now? How do you expect the galaxy to function? With this new balance of power? Jake's expression softened slightly. For the first time since the confrontation began, he looked more like a diplomat than a military strategist. Earth hopes that the galaxy can learn to function through cooperation instead of domination. We've proven that defensive alliances can maintain peace more effectively than fear-based hierarchies. We've shown that mutual prosperity creates more wealth than exploitation. He paused and looked directly at the major power delegates. You can continue to control your existing territories. Your species will remain important players in galactic affairs. But you will have to earn respect through partnership rather than demanding it through strength. The Saran delegate stood up, his armor reflecting the chamber's lights. And if we refuse? What happens if the established powers reject your new order? Jake's diplomatic mask slipped for a moment, revealing something harder and more dangerous underneath. Then you will discover what Earth is capable of when we stop acting nice. The chamber fell silent, The threat was clear and credible. Earth had spent 50 years preparing for this possibility. Their network was in place, their allies were ready, and their capabilities had been demonstrated. "Let me be very specific," Admiral Rick Carter said. "Earth currently maintains 17 rapid response fleets in strategic positions throughout the galaxy. Each fleet includes advanced stealth vessels, long-range strike capabilities, and defensive systems that can protect allied worlds from any known weapons." More holographic displays showed the positions of human military assets. Ships that had been dismissed as research vessels and cargo haulers were revealed to be sophisticated warships, capable of extended combat operations. Our personnel include veterans of conflicts that the Council has never heard about. They understand warfare in ways that most galactic species have forgotten. They are trained, equipped, and positioned to respond to threats against our allies. Within hours instead of weeks, the message was clear. Earth had the capability to enforce their new vision of galactic order if necessary. The question was whether the major powers would accept change peacefully or require a demonstration of. Human Resolve. Council. Speaker Veltar studied the displays showing human capabilities throughout the galaxy. His ancient mind processed the implications of what he was seeing. The balance of power had shifted permanently. There was no returning to the old order. "What are Earth's terms?" he asked quietly. "Simple," Jake replied. "Respect the sovereignty of all species. Conduct trade through fair negotiation rather than economic coercion. Resolve disputes through diplomacy rather than force. Accept that conquest is no longer an acceptable method of expansion. And in return, Earth will continue to provide defensive support to species that request it. We will maintain our alliance network to ensure that no world faces conquest alone. We will share technology and knowledge with partners who demonstrate peaceful intentions." Jake's voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber as he delivered his final offer. The galaxy can have peace and prosperity for all species, or it can have war with Earth and our 43 allied worlds. The choice belongs to this council. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives consulted with their home, governments via encrypted communications. Military advisors calculated the costs of potential